here at the California Department of Education. Along with all of you, I am virtually joined by my colleague April Tormey and my administrator, Lori Marshall. While normally you'd be able to see the Zoom presenter, unfortunately my state-issued laptop is not camera-enabled. But today's webinar is designed to provide local educational agencies with an update with regards to the impact of COVID-19 on ESSA CSI LEA grants. For those looking for the information on the County Office of Education CSI grants, please tune in later today at 2 p.m. for that webinar using the logon information that was previously provided. Please note, our new division name is the Student Achievement and Support Division rather than the Improvement and Accountability Division. The new name is more inclusive and representative of all of the work we do in our division. I know we've gotten a few questions on where the presentation can be found on our webpage, but please note it will be posted soon. Like many of you, some of us are also working remotely and dealing with similar technological challenges. Yesterday, CDE's power went out, thus causing a delay with the posting. Please check back periodically throughout the day as we're working again to get it posted as soon as possible. And when you check back, please go to the CSI webpage and then click on the Technical Assistance tab. Once you scroll down under the Resources section, you'll see both the CSI LEA and the CSI COE PowerPoint presentations. Again, that's the CDE CSI webpage, the Technical Assistance tab. Under the Resources section is where you'll be able to find it. Today, we will review the changes for both the fiscal year 2018 and fiscal year 2019 LEA grants. We will start with changes that impact the fiscal year 2018 CSI LEA funds, then review the changes that impact the fiscal year 2019 CSI LEA funds. Once we have completed these slides, we'll take a brief pause to answer a few questions. If we're unable to answer your question today or you would like additional information after the webinar, please contact the CISO at siso@cde.ca.gov, and our contact information will also be displayed at the end of the presentation. And before wrapping up, I will also take some time to highlight some resources and information related to various student groups. Beginning with this slide, we're only going to discuss the changes for the fiscal year 2018 LEA grant, in which schools were also identified for CSI on the California School Dashboard. We know schools were identified for CSI using the 2018 dashboard with an expectation to implement their CSI plan in the 2019-20 school year. The grant period for the fiscal year 2018 funds began on March 18, 2019, and that the original grant period end date was September 30th, 2020. As a result of COVID and its impact on schools and communities throughout the state, California's federal flexibility waiver was approved. Waiver of Section 421B of the General Education Provisions Act, also known as GEPA, extended the period of availability of fiscal year 2018 funds for programs in which the state educational agency participates under its approved consolidated state plan until September 30th, 2021. Fiscal year 2018 funds are included in this waiver, which extended the period of availability of these funds to September 30th, 2021. Is CSI waived for the 2019-20 school year? And the answer is no. LEAs are expected to continue with the implementation of CSI as much as is reasonable, practicable, and necessary. The GEPA waiver that I mentioned in the previous slide is a timeline waiver. It only extends the period of availability for fiscal year 2018 funds until September 30th, 2021. Essentially, LEAs have an additional 12 months to expend their 2018 allocation to implement their CSI plans into the 2020-21 school year. Are fiscal year 2018 funds still available to LEAs? Yes, Fiscal year 2018 funds are still available as the period of availability was extended to September 30th, 2021 under the waiver of Section 421B of the GEPA instead of the original end date of September 30th, 2020. Any LEA with an approved 2018-19 ESSA CSI application for funding will continue to receive distributions of its fiscal year 2018 allocation through September 30th, 2021, or until it reports its final fiscal year 2018 expenditures. Keep in mind, all fiscal year 2018 funds must be fully obligated by the grant end date and liquidated within 90 days thereafter. If an LEA closes out their fiscal year 2018 grant prior to September 30th, 2021, expenditures should be liquidated within 90 days of reporting final expenditures. Over the next two slides, I want to draw your attention to how the fiscal year 2018 grant reporting periods have changed. This table reflects the current grant reporting information. Right now, LEAs are in the performance period beginning March 1 through June 30th, 2020, which aligns with Report 4, shown on the screen, which will have a due date of July 31st, 2020. Given the stay-at-home order and school closures as a result of COVID-19, you might be thinking, my LEA was not able to expend any funds during this time period and has nothing to report. Regardless if funds were expended, all LEAs must submit a report by each reporting due date. If no funds were expended, then an LEA would report 0. As you can see in this table, 4 additional reporting periods have been added to accommodate the extended period of availability of the fiscal year 2018 funds. The last performance period ends September 30th, 2021, consistent with the GEPA waiver, with the final report due October 31st, 2021. This revised reporting timeline can also be found on the CDE's CSI webpage under the Funding tab in the Fiscal Information section and is already posted. Can a reporting due date be skipped? As I mentioned a few slides back, reports cannot be skipped as an LEA is required to submit an expenditure report for each reporting period. If there are no expenditures for a given report, then an LEA must enter 0 for each object code series in the Grant Management and Reporting tool, also known as the GMARCH. Does an LEA need to wait until September 30th, 2021 to close out its fiscal year 2018 grant? No. An LEA can close out its fiscal year 2018-19 ESSA CSI grant once it has expended all of its fiscal year 2018 CSI funds. If this is the case, the LEA should liquidate its funds within 90 days of reporting final expenditures. If additional time is needed to liquidate, the LEA may request and receive an extension of the liquidation period, including up to 90 days of the close of the grant period, with the close of the grant period being September 30th, 2021. Should an LEA wish to close their grant out early, or for additional questions on this topic, please reach out to the CISO using the contact information on the screen. May the LEA use its 2019-20 CSI plan and the 2021 school year to meet CSI planning requirements? So switching gears a little bit, the answer is absolutely. It is expected that the LEA update its CSI plan as is reasonable, practicable, or necessary in order to meet the identified student needs in the 2021 school year, and to continue to implement evidence-based interventions, strategies, and activities consistent with its school improvement goals. We recognize that LEAs are supporting schools and students as much as possible and trying to fill the learning gaps that are sure to exist. So over these next 3 slides, I will highlight some guiding questions that can support LEAs with thinking about possible next steps and questions that can be used to facilitate meaningful conversations with relevant stakeholders. So how can we think creatively and innovatively about how to continue our school improvement work while leveraging our local decision-making to determine what is best for our learning community? And how do we continue to provide supports and interventions that are consistent with CSI eligible schools' support and improvement plans? As a resource, LEAs are encouraged to access the Continuous Improvement Resources webpage. If you reviewed it, you know there are many tools and templates that can be adapted to support the continuous improvement work at each LEA. The web address has been provided for you below. These additional guiding questions will require LEAs to think more critically about implementation data and outcomes. How much were we able to implement in the 2019-20 school year? How well did we do it? Are there enough data to know? What do the data tell us? And did students improve as a result of our evidence-based intervention strategies or activities? And as a result of the implementation data and outcomes, LEA should think about what do we need to adjust, change, fine-tune, or abandon to continue improving student outcomes in the 2020-21 school year? What are our priorities? What makes sense? And if you need additional support, consider reaching out to your County Office of Education for tools and resources, expertise, knowledge, and support. While it is not our expectation that you answer each item line by line, it is our hope and intent that these questions serve as a guide for the types of considerations that LEAs should continue discussing with their internal and external stakeholders as we all work back to getting back to having a sense of normalcy. So now we will transition to reviewing information related to the 2019-20 CSI LEA grant that was funded with fiscal year 2019 CSI funds. LEAs that are receiving these funds had schools identified on the 2019 dashboard with CSI plans to be implemented in the 2020-21 school year. And this grant has a grant period that began on March 25th, 2020 and ends on September 30th, 2021. Again, some of you may be wondering with all that's happening if CSI will be waived for the 2021 school year, and the answer is no. As part of the federal waiver on assessment and accountability that was granted to California on March 27, 2020, California had to assure that any school that is identified for comprehensive or targeted support and improvement or additional targeted support and improvement or ATSI in the 2019-20 school year will maintain that identification status in the 2020-21 school year and continue to receive supports and interventions consistent with the school's support and improvement plan in the 2020-21 school year. With regards to the 2020-21 CSI and ATSI plan development and implementation requirements and timeline, consider the following. LEAs with schools identified on the 2018 dashboard that did not exit on the 2019 dashboard could revise or update as needed and as is reasonable, practicable, necessary their 2019-20 CSI and ATSI plans to be used in the 2020-21 school year. And for LEAs with schools newly identified on the 2019 dashboard, meaning that they were not originally identified on the 2018 dashboard, we'll need to develop and implement a 2020-21 CSI or ATSI plan that aligns with their identification status. Given the evolution of COVID-19 and the impact that it is having on our educational system, it is our desire to support the varied circumstances that many districts may find themselves in, but without overlooking the CSI and ATSI requirements that are still in place. Please note that the CDE continues to work with the State Board of Education and the U.S. Department of Education on the school improvement timeline and requirements. So when thinking about the CSI plan timeline development for the 2021 school year, let's take a look at this proposed timeline. So from March through May of 2020, plan development activities should begin and continue through the summer, hence the palm tree, and begin to wrap up by September or October. From October through November 2020, schools and LEAs should begin approving or adopting their CSI plans. This time frame is really important to note because Report 1 for the fiscal year 2019 funds, which covers the performance period from March 25th, which is the beginning of the grant, through September 30th of this year, will require LEAs to report on their CSI plan approval and or adoption date. And then from December 2020 through January 2021, CSI plan implementation activities begin. Bear in mind that this timeline is proposed, and LEAs should determine for themselves what is reasonable, practicable, and necessary. If you think that you need to plan sometime before then, you don't need to wait until October, November to have your CSI plan approved. This timeline is not in any ways a means to prohibit LEAs from moving forward. This is just a proposed timeline to show how this aligns with the upcoming due date, the new due date of the LCAP. Under the proposed timeline, how long should 2020-21 CSI plans be in place? Remember that fiscal year 2019 funds were recently distributed to eligible LEAs that had schools identified for CSI on the 2019 dashboard. Fiscal year 2019 funds are available for CSI activities through September 30th, 2021. These funds can be used for 2020-21 CSI plan development and implementation through the end of the grant period. And the sooner CSI plans can be approved or adopted and implemented, the sooner students, teachers, and leaders can receive the supports and interventions consistent with the school support and improvement plan. So how does the proposed timeline work with the application for funding, how does the proposed timeline work when the application for funding was completed to align with the LCAP, and the LCAP is now due December 15? Well, given the unprecedented nature of COVID-19 and the impact it has had on established processes, LEAs may need to think strategically about the alignment of its 2020-21 CSI plan to its LCAP. The proposed timeline closely aligns with the Governor's Executive Order N5620 that extended the deadline for adoption of the 2021 LCAP from July 1, 2020 to December 15, 2020, and allows the LEA additional time to align its 2020-21 CSI interventions, strategies, and activities with the goals, actions, and services in the LCAP as applicable. And as we know, alignment happens best when there is internal coherence. Does the GEPA waiver for fiscal year 18 funds apply to fiscal year 19 funds? No. The GEPA waiver only extends the period of availability for fiscal year 18 funds from September 30th, 2021, which gives those LEAs that receive that grant an additional 12 months to spend those funds. Fiscal year 19 funds are still set to end September 30th, 2021. When will LEAs begin receiving their fiscal year 2019 apportionments? Well, in April 2020, the CDE processed each LEA's first apportionment of 25% of their total allocation. It is anticipated that LEAs will receive this apportionment in May or June 2020. Final allocations can be found by accessing the web address below, or if you're on the CDE CSI webpage, go to the Funding tab, then click the Fiscal Information heading, then the fiscal year 2019-20 ESSA CSI LEA funding results. Do schools identified for CSI with the 2019 dashboard still have to complete a school plan for student achievement or CSIPSA? Yes. Schools identified for CSI in January 2020 from the 2019 dashboard are still required to develop a CSI plan. And schools that operate a Title I Part A school-wide program can maintain the use of the CSIPSA to meet both the school-wide and CSI planning requirements. And with regards to the CSIPSA, there is no statutory deadline or timeline for the development or approval of Title I Part A school-wide plans. However, the CDE's guidance has been for CSI plan development and approval to be conducted prior to the start of the school year so that implementation of the CSI plan can begin by the first day of the school year. The CDE continues to work with the State Board of Education and the U.S. Department of Education on an adjusted 2020-21 CSI plan development and implementation timeline. If you reference slide 18, you'll see that same CSI proposed timeline that we discussed earlier. Do schools identified for CSI with the 2019 dashboard still have to complete a CSIPSA? Additionally, the goal of the proposed planning timeline is to provide maximum flexibility with CSI planning requirements, while ensuring that schools continue to receive the resources and supports needed to improve student outcomes in schools identified for CSI. For additional questions regarding the CSIPSA or LCAP, please email your questions to lcff@cde.ca.gov. Is there any information on the CSIPSA specifically for single school districts using the LCAP serving as the CSIPSA? As of right now, there are no plans to waive or make any changes to the language that would prohibit single school districts and charter schools from using the LCAP as the CSIPSA to meet federal school planning requirements. In continuing with discussing the CSIPSA, statute does require schools operating a Title I Part A school-wide program to develop a CSIPSA annually with the school site council and receive approval by the local governing board. But it does not provide a specific timeline as to when the development and approval must happen. The development and approval timeline for a CSIPSA remains a local decision based on what is best for the school and the local community. Do LEAs have spending flexibility with their CSI funds? For example, can the LEA use its CSI funds for summer learning activities? The ESSA does allow for flexibility for the LEA to determine the CSI interventions, strategies, activities that best meet the needs of its students and learning community. But in addition, the ESSA requires that CSI plans are evidence-based and that the selected intervention, strategies, or activities match the identified student needs and address the reason or reasons for identification. For example, an LEA concludes that a summer learning program meets the requirements described above, and expenditures are reasonable, necessary, allowable, and allocable, and in that case, CSI funds could be used for a summer learning program, as long as expenditures fall within the grant period timelines. But remember, CSI funds can only be used to improve outcomes in the schools identified for CSI. Continuing with the previous example about using CSI funds for summer learning activities, a school must continue to receive all of its state and local funds it would have otherwise received in the absence of the CSI funds. For schools identified with the 2019 dashboard, the fiscal year 2019-20 CSI grants began March 25th, 2020, and will end September 30th, 2021. All fiscal year 2019 funds must be fully expended and obligated by the end date and liquidated within 90 days thereafter. To support LEAs in making decisions about selecting and implementing evidence-based intervention strategies and activities, the ESSA guidance on evidence-based requirements can be found by accessing the link shown on the screen. The revised grant reporting timeline table reflects the revisions from when the 2019-20 application for funding was released to the current reporting timelines. You can see from the report name column that there are now only a total of 4 reports instead of the 5 reports as was listed in the application for funding. Report 4 is now the final report and grant evaluation. Moving over to the revised performance period column, you can see that these dates were expanded, allowing for additional time within each performance period to expend CSI funding. However, the grant end date is still September 30th, 2021. And lastly, the revised reporting due dates also align with the end of each of the revised performance periods. Our office anticipates providing GMART training or the grant management and reporting tool training prior to the due date for report 1 around August or September of this year. This training will assist LEAs with entering the reporting data into the GMART platform. As a quick planning recap, it's important to continue with the CSI and ATI's work, CSI and ATSI work as much as possible and as is reasonable, practicable, and necessary. Think creatively and innovatively about how to accomplish school improvement work. Leverage local decision-making about what is best for your learning community and how to continue to support students in schools identified for CSI or ATSI, and be mindful of equity, access, and privacy when thinking about meeting and collaboration. For additional information about COVID-19's impact on CSI or our continuous improvement resources, CSI program requirements, California's federal waiver, or other CDE coronavirus-related topics, including weekly updates from our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, please utilize the web addresses shown on the screen. And so now I will pause for a few moments and take a look at some of the questions you've posted and see if we can get you some answers. And for those that we're unable to get to, please email our School Improvement and Support Office with your questions or give us a call and we'll be back with you as soon as we can.
There are several questions around funding and planning. One is, does reporting 0 expenditures for a reporting period affect the next funding release?
So typically when LEAs receive an allocation, they receive 25% of their allocation up front. And then during the first reporting period, whatever they expend, once they have an approved expenditure report, then your distribution will match those funds. If an LEA reports 0, then there will be no distribution of your total allocation. And so with each reporting period, whatever you spend, you would receive, providing that your expenditure report has been approved by our office.
Thank you. Several questions are around during this unique time, if they have some schools in 2018 CSI and some schools in 2019 CSI, can they use 18 funds for 19 schools or 19 funds for 18 schools?
Unfortunately, grants cannot across fiscal years. So even though you may have a school that was eligible in 2018, mixing the cohorts and mixing the funding is not allowed because you have a plan that was developed in 2018 for a subset of schools in this particular manner. And you'll have a plan in 2019. Now you may update those plans, but the funding is separate.
It might be helpful to share something about our GMART. Several questions relate to how do we manage expenditure reporting if we have some CSI schools in 2018 and others in 2019?
Certainly. So when logging into the GMART, for those of you who only have schools in one of the fiscal years, but for those of you who have both, each grant is separate. And so when you log into your fiscal year 18, you'll see the schools that were eligible for CSI as a result of the 2018 dashboard. And if that LEA also has either different or some of the same schools, you'll see those listed in a 2019 section on the GMART. And so the funds are partitioned based on fiscal year.
Thank you. So around planning questions, we've had some ask if the CSI plan is the SIPSA and if they need or want to make changes since COVID-19. Do you have any guidance around that?
Yes, so for most LEAs or for many LEAs, the CSI plan is the SIPSA, with the exception of some charters and single school districts are allowed to use their LCAP as their SIPSA. But for the LEAs where that's not the case, the CSI plan is the SIPSA. And with that being, what was the second part of the question, April?
Guidance around plan changes.
Yes, and we do anticipate that given what's happening in schools closing during the last quarter of the school year, that LEAs will update as reasonable, practicable, or necessary their 2018-19 CSI plan to take into the 2019 CSI plan based on the 2018 identification into the 2021 school year. So I know there are a lot of dates, and I promise when we get our, if it's not already posted, the answer to that question with all the different, when you were identified, when the plan was to be implemented, and what you can do in the 2021 school year, that will be clear. I know it's hard to probably visualize just by hearing it without seeing it on paper for yourself.
There was a request to review slide 15. I'm not sure if you want to go back or we can address that through individually.
Let me take a look and see what slide 15 was. Is CSI waived for the 2021 school year? So we can go back. It doesn't hurt if it's not posted yet. So hold on. So here's slide 15. Yep. So CSI is not waived for the 2021 school year. And so here, the federal waiver on assessment and accountability assured that any school identified for CSI, TSI, or ATSI will maintain that identification status in the 2021 school year and continue to receive supports and interventions consistent with the school support and improvement plan or their CSI plan in the 2021 school year.
Some follow-up questions relate to funding in the future and any expectations around that. Can you address that?
Certainly. So at this time, the CDE is working with the State Board of Education and the U.S. Department of Education to determine what flexibilities the state has with regards to CSI funding going forward. Given that our 2020 dashboard will not produce schools for identification for CSI or ATSI. And so when the department has more information and guidance, we will sure to release that to you.
Okay, all the other questions are more specific that we'd like to address going forward through our CISO or follow-up.
Absolutely.
And or they are addressed in the remaining slides. So please stay tuned.
All right, thank you, April. So let's go back. So moving on to the resources and information for supporting our student groups. When we discuss school support under the ESSA, we typically talk about comprehensive support and improvement, targeted support and improvement, and additional targeted support and improvement. And while the focus of our webinar is about the changes made to the fiscal year 2018-19 and 2019-20 CSI LEA grants for school-wide support, we know that student groups form the basis of identification for schools that were identified for additional targeted support and improvement, with the emphasis being placed on the word targeted. And so I wanted to take just a few brief moments to highlight many of our impacted student groups with an eye towards information and resources to support them. We will not go into details today about additional targeted support and improvement, but as we move forward, it's important for LEAs and schools to be aware of how these student groups performed on both the 2018 and 2019 dashboard, as future data can foreshadow what is to come. Please note, for specific questions related to any of the following student groups, please email the respective offices or contacts listed on the following slides. With regards to data for English learners and with regards to data for English learners and English learners that also receive special education services, please note the following. They are not a homogeneous group. And to consider disaggregating their data by the time in a program or school within the United States, their prior school experience in their country of origin, their literacy level in the primary language, and their English language proficiency level. Please utilize CDE's DataQuest platform, which is a web-based data reporting system to retrieve information about various student groups. Regarding English learner resources, more information related to the regional English learner specialists for assistance within the state system of support, the English learner specialist resources, or resources related to the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence can be found using the respective web addresses to access their contact information or highlighted resources. As it relates to COVID-19 English learner resources, please utilize the CDE webpage shown on the screen for more information about English language development distance learning frequently asked questions, parent newsletters with information regarding COVID-19 topics, also available in the top 5 languages in addition to English, and FAQs regarding the ELAC and DLAC requirements during the COVID-19 physical school closures. Regarding supporting our foster youth, the following resources can be accessed on their respective CDE web pages. The Foster Youth Services Coordinating Program, which is designed to increase interagency support for foster youth and build capacity within school districts and charter schools. The state-level educational outcomes for foster youth, the educational rights, partnerships, resources for foster youth, and contact information for each local educational agency's educational liaisons for foster youth. For resources supporting students experiencing homelessness, the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act is federal legislation that ensures that educational rights and protections of children and youths experiencing homelessness. Keep in mind that all LEAs must ensure that homeless students have access to the same free, appropriate education, including public preschools, as provided to other children and youths. Program strategies to assist in the areas of transportation, identification, enrollment, preschool, and special education can be found on the CDE webpage shown on the screen. And additional resources and contact information for an LEA's homeless liaisons can be found by accessing the webpage also shown at the bottom of the screen. Regarding our students with disabilities, access the following CDE web pages for information on resources and guidelines on the Common Core state standards for the special education community, resources and supports for parents, guardians, and families of the children with disabilities, and additional information and resources to serve the unique needs of persons with disabilities so that each person will meet or exceed high standards of achievement in academic and non-academic schools. Excuse me. in academic and non-academic skills. Shown here and on the next slide is the contact information for all of the programs that were reviewed in this presentation. For questions about CSI program requirements, contact the CISO. For questions about supporting English learners, contact the English Learner Support Division. For assistance with supporting foster youth, contact the Integrated Student Support and Programs Office. For assistance with supporting students experiencing homelessness, also contact the Integrated Student Support and Programs Office. And for assistance about supporting students with disabilities, contact the Special Education Division. Again, I know many of you have asked questions and many of you have not been answered, but if you would like additional information, please email your question or comments to the School Improvement Support Office at siso@cde.ca.gov, or please feel to give us a call at area code 916-319-0833. Or for other questions regarding other programs that were mentioned, please email or call that program office. These last two slides provide the alternative text for the proposed timeline picture that was shown on slide 18. We've now reached the end of this webinar and hope that you have found these updates helpful. Please don't hesitate to reach out to any of the offices mentioned for additional support. We thank you for your time and hopefully you will have a great morning.